Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, villagers, wherever in the world you may be today. I'm Ben Kesnoka, partner here at Village Global, a network native venture firm. In today's hour, we're going to start by talking some high level points about AI agents and the state of play. We'll transition to talk a little bit about investing in AI applications and where there's really durable value in the ecosystem right now. And then in the back half, we'll transition to talking about building agents and building AI products. So we'll start with Amjad Masad on stage, then we'll invite Yohei Nakajima on stage, who's an early builder of AI agents, to join the conversation. So for the founders who've joined us today, we'll get fairly applied in the second half of the conversation. In the first half of the conversation, we'll cover a bit more of the conceptual landscape and topics related to investors. And throughout this hour, we might even build a thing or two in Replit ourselves in real time. We'll see. Amjad Masad, he grew up in Jordan, teaching himself to code on a borrowed computer. Today, of course, CEO, co-founder of Replit. He started Replit in 2016 with a mission to make software creation as universal as literacy. As many of us know, the September 2024 debut of Replit Agent, a conversational agent that can spin up full stack applications in minutes, was a phenomenon in Silicon Valley. So few people have a clearer, more practical view of how autonomous software agents will reshape engineering and development. Amjad's also an active angel investor and partner in a fund that we've anchored at Village, so we have a very close relationship on many levels. Amjad, welcome.
Thank you. Really excited to be here.
So let's start in practical terms. What, in your view, can AI agents do today? What are the most impressive use cases? And then what will they be able to do 12 months from now? How complex will the tasks be?
Yeah. I think there are like broadly two use cases. One you might call coding, but I think it's a little more general than that. And it is like computer use broadly. People think of computer use as like something like operator, but actually it is more like you give the model a virtual machine and it knows how to execute code on it, install packages, write scripts, use apps, do as much as possible with the computer. Now, this technology unlocks coding agents, but you could do other things with it. And this is where these two use cases kind of start to overlap. The second one is informational, and that deep research is the biggest one. If you think to the early times of like Perplexity and other kind of AI search engines, it used to be that you would ask the question, they have a more deterministic system, go out to the web, get information, and do retrieval augmented generation. So I'll put that in context and then ask the AI to summarize. So that used to be the model for RAG sort of systems. Now it sort of got inverted, where the question goes to the agent formulates the searches in the form of tool calls. So it'll search the web, it'll search some existing index or what have you, and it'll iterate until it's sort of satisfied with the amount of information that it gets, and then summarizes the output for you. So you can see that in O3, you can see it in deep research, you can see it in Perplexity. Really, that's where sort of the field is going. So I would define that as like a research agent, and then we have a computer use agent. Now, where it starts to blur, you see kind of products like Manus and some of the new ones, like the Chinese ones specifically, where they're trying to do, we're like, okay, we're going to give the AI a computer, and we're going to also give it search tools, and we're going to like create a system that lets you do deep research with actions involved, such as like planning a trip and things like that. I think these systems are still very brittle, but they're very interesting kind of early view on what like more general systems that can fit a lot of different use cases would look like. But obviously then there's like the coding agents. So
Yeah.
the Replit agent, I think, was the first in the market as like a accessible coding agent that anyone can use. But since then, Devin launched, and Codex, and there are a few other startups that are doing that. And sort of they're maturing really fast. Even Replit Agent back in September was kind of like a bit of a toy, and right now we see people take applications all the way to commercialization, run critical infrastructure inside the companies, write internal tools, has gotten to a point where it's actually useful in creating commercial value.
Got it. So Replit Agent's an example of using AI agents to build software. I guess there's so maybe it's sort of a layered dynamic, right? Because there's what are the most impressive use cases of AI agents, and then what are the most impressive use cases of Replit created software products,
Right.
kind of distinct. Clearly, on the software development side, there's been transformative progress over the last month. But you just mentioned planning a trip. Isn't that like the canonical case of the thing that's still too hard to do? Like you actually can't use an AI agent today to book a trip to Paris, correct?
It is hard. Yeah, it is still hard. I think that you can see the glimpses of it starting to work. Like, if you sit down enough with an OpenAI operator, you will spend more time prompting than you would do it manually. But some people are enjoying that. It's like, oh, the computer booked me something, order DoorDash. So you can see glimpses of that, but it's not working yet.
And what's your prognosis as to like the development of progress over the next 6, 12, 18 months? Like when will we be using natural language to say, book my trip to Paris, get a car rental when I'm on the ground, and also create an itinerary for a 3-day, great set of tourism?
So the bottleneck to that is computer use, specifically desktop computer use. So right now, agents are very good at running low-level Linux commands. So like it knows how to start a terminal and type things in it. Obviously, that's not enough to book a trip. Instead, it needs to start a desktop environment. It needs to open a web browser. It needs to go to, I don't know what people use these days, Expedia or what have you. It needs to like create an account. It needs to like maybe have a credit card, and it needs to kind of go and do this purchasing. This like computer use technology is very, very like primitive now. It's not very good. It's slow. It's expensive. The way it works is like it does an action, takes a screenshot, brings it back to the language model. The language model does reasoning over it, and then goes back, finds like a place in the screen to like click or type, and then takes a screenshot, goes back. And it's very, very slow. And it's running, I don't know how many frames per second, but it feels like 0.1 frame per second or something like that. It's like really orders of magnitude where it should be in order to be usable. So I think this is where the bottleneck is. If I were to predict, I would say like in the next 3 to 6 months, it's going to get to a point where it's really useful, such that these like general purpose assistants will start to work. But also like,
So when you say general purpose assistance, you mean like this is the chief of staff vision or what?
yeah, I think it'll take more time to mature to the point where it's like a chief of staff, but you'll start to get the bare bones of a general purpose assistant where you can say, book a meeting, book a trip, like more like EA, like basic EA as opposed to chief of staff, handle my calendar. And I think there'll be another component of this that's sort of another sort of secular trend here, which is how much time can the agent work before it stops being coherent? When Replit Agent V1 came out, uh, we found that like it can work on the order of 3 to 5 minutes and still be coherent. Anything beyond that, it just starts really glitching out. Sometimes it'll start like spitting out Chinese characters and things like that. It's pretty weird. Um,
Just the fatigue gets to it at minute 5 or 6. It's like, fuck it, let's just start talking in Chinese.
yeah, I did that too. So and then specifically like Anthropic is the making the best product, the best progress here. And then like, Anthropic 3.7 comes out and it can stay coherent much longer, 15, 20, 30 minutes. There's a paper that came out showing that every 7 months, and the plot is like, straight up kind of sort of like, fits the curve exactly. Every 7 months, we're actually doubling the number of minutes that the AI can work and stay coherent. And this is such a crucial thing for agents, because some tasks simply will need to take hours, right? In fact, like a fun thing to think about is some tasks at some point will need to take years if you're trying to come up with a new scientific theory, right? But kind of back to earth today, I think actually it turns out to be an understatement, because Claude 4 just came out. Opus is their big model, very expensive, very big, very slow. But in the blog post announcing it, they said that it is able to work up to 7 hours. Now, I haven't tested that, but if that's true, we we jumped in 3 months. We didn't jump 2x. We jumped, I don't know, like close to an order of magnitude, which is kind of insane. And so if this is accelerating, then yeah, by the end of the year, you could have something like a chief of assistant, a chief of staff kind of type product.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's a great we'll get a link to that paper and send it around to everyone who's here so folks can see that. But that is transformative. Amjad, you mentioned the kinds of things that people are building in Replit today. What have been some sort of pleasant surprises, unexpected use cases you've seen from output of Replit Agent? And for everyone on the call today, how would you guide them in terms of building in Replit in the most effective kind of way?
The most surprising thing has been uh, how quickly can you make a useful application that in the past would have taken months and maybe years. Yohi actually on the call, who's going to be doing demos, I think later on, recently did this thing where someone was asking for like a Google Reader replacement. I think there was like a thread around um, Yohi made a replacement for some other thing, but someone asked for a Google Reader replacement, and within an hour he responded with a Replit app, and I went and tested it, and it was a perfect RSS reader, like really fully featured. And so
And for those and for the for younger people on the call, they don't remember the tragedy that was the sunsetting of Google Reader. But for all of us Infovores who grew up reading, OG blogs, the decline of Google Reader was a very sad day. And so it's been brought back to life.
yes, so you can go use it right now, and it's really good. And the fact that people are able to kind of make these kind of software applications very quickly.
And when you say people, because we have a mix of non-technical technical people on the call, who is the you? You can make software products very quickly. Obviously, Amjad, your vision from the beginning of Replit was to sort of democratize coding and software development. How skilled does one have to be excellent at building products in Replit today? Skilled technically.
It's interesting. We've been at Replit, we've been thinking about a lot about what makes a great Replit user. It's actually a very tough question because if you try to split it by how technical it is not clear cuts. Because like um, we have doctors and nurses that are not very technical, but have uh, obviously very intelligent, have like good systems thinking capabilities, are able to kind of break down problems, and have some amount of grit. If you went through medical school, you probably have all the grit in the world, um, and are able to build like really great applications. On the other hand, you have technical people like Yogi who maybe didn't have a coding background, but is able to like kind of figure the things out, is sort of resourceful, can move really fast. Um, but actually, there's sort of like a bit of a U curve. If you become a little too technical, it's actually they start to struggle to use the agent because they're trying to force it to do certain technical decisions, whereas like Replit Agent is sort of programmed in a way to have like more freedom. It needs like a little bit more freedom to be able to like make the decisions that best fit the platform and best fit the use case.
I mean,
Um,
that is kind of fascinating, Amjad, which is like, is there such a thing as being too knowledgeable or too technical? Because in a sense, this is what was fascinating about the economy and how AI is changing all of our work. Like there's a sense in which if you have too much expertise in the way things used to be, that
yeah,
could make you less equipped to use modern AI tools effectively.
yeah. I mean, if you look at Noam Chomsky, like wrote this New York Times article like early on in the ChatGPT, kind of like sort of poo-pooing ChatGPT and saying it's like not doing anything interesting and things like that. And so like he spent his life studying a language and studying all that it takes to kind of like what is the cognition of sort of language. And for him that seemed like a gimmick. He sort of also didn't understand like how fast it's going to get better. And so you see it all the time. Those who are experts, first of all, they tend to be like a little more jaded and cynical. I think that the more time you spend in a certain field, you're like more battered and beat up by, by the time you get to like retirement age, and so you're sort of like skeptical because you've seen a lot of things that was sold as some kind of panacea, and like they all kind of fail and flatter, especially AI. If you've been in computer science since the 1950s, you've seen like 4 or 5 AI cycles that went nowhere. And so like people who come in with a lot of skepticism tend to not be successful, and tend to like approach it and it's like not really positive way. Like I think there's like an emotional component where you need to be curious, you need to be fascinated, you need to be interesting and interested in using these systems. But again, that goes to show that where we are at Replit is right now we're looking at a cluster of traits as opposed to uh, technical skills, as opposed to kind of whatever continuum we're going to put it at. Instead, like personality traits and character traits is actually more of a signifier to how successful someone is going to be.
Okay, so the personality traits of the human
Yep.
matter more than pre-existing technical skills.
To some extent, like
Yeah,
there's
to
a
some extent.
baseline. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess just to distill this, because this is we're jumping ahead a little bit, but this is a really important point.
Yeah.
Um, as knowledge workers and professionals, all of us ourselves, what are the traits that we should lean into? So an openness and and curiosity, that's sort of base case. But are
Right.
there particular like is patience and a
Yes.
willingness? Because I've always had this idea on the side of creating a museum of first drafts where
Yeah.
like you go I imagine this building where it's the first draft of every incredible artistic creation in history, whether it be they books or statues or even like first drafts of business plans so that people can see how shitty first drafts usually are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many of us psychologically aren't comfortable with the idea of shipping a shitty first draft.
Right.
But everyone who's done anything great had a shitty first draft.
That's
But
right.
there's some personality or cognitive disposition on being comfortable with something that's a shitty first draft. And this for prompt engineering and AI output, I've seen so many people, even in just simple ChatGPT or Claude, type something in, the output's kind of not very good, and they're like, "Oh, AI sucks," and they're not willing to stick with it. I'm not sure how do you cultivate that tendency or openness to going through 2 or 3 or 4 bad drafts before you get to the promised land.
So I actually wrote a blog post a while back, years ago, maybe a decade ago, uh, called "What is Perfectionism and How to Cure It." So I think the I was thinking about it with regards to myself, like how I wanted to be more comfortable, like putting out first drafts, as you say. And I found that perfectionism is sort of like a part excuse, part like insecurity. It's like speaking of traits, it's like perhaps some negative traits that someone has that you need to sort of debug and get rid of. And so perfectionism is an excuse to not do something. You're like, this is not up to my quality bar. This is and this is like too embarrassing. I'm not gonna launch it or continue to use it because it just doesn't work. But that's an excuse for you to stop doing the work. And so those are like really comfortable excuses. How do you cultivate? I mean, I think grit is the right word. If you remember this TED talk
Yeah, Angela Duckworth. Yep.
when TED used to be about like these pop science things, which was fun. But then everything got hit by the replication crisis. None of those things are done.
Now it's just we've gone from social science to just vibe psychology. I mean, I do think, by the way, vibe. Put the word vibe in front of almost any discipline, and it makes more sense.
Right, right.
It's vibes all the way down in most
Vibes all the way
fields.
down. Yeah, but like that talks kind of stuck with me because I see it all over the place where grit as a trait is more important in some cases than intelligence.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's a good insight
example,
on.
our
Yeah.
president has a lot of grits.
Yeah.
He's made it to the White House a few times, despite some shortcomings.
Well, I think I hadn't thought about that in the context of AI tooling and using AI agents like persistence, grit, overcoming perfectionism are actually characteristics of higher value today, which is novel. Before we bring Yohei on, let's just Amjad, we have a bunch of investors and founders in the room, but people who are thinking about how to create durable value in the AI economy. What's your latest thinking on moats? You see a lot of the foundation labs moving into the app layer, OpenAI with Windsurf or announcing Codex. You also see startups like Cursor hiring a bunch of researchers, moving onto the turf of the labs. Like, how do you think about the landscape of startup companies? And as where you wear your investor hat, what kind of lens or frameworks do you use to assess long-term potential value?
Yeah. Um, Let me just like say a word on moats first. I feel like in Silicon Valley, like the word moat is like overloaded to the point that it's often useless. So like, what is moats? Sometimes people will say our moat is X, Y, and Z. And it's basically they're saying we have a feature. Uh, that's like, okay. But like I try to like understand what that meant, and I think the best book and the best sort of science behind moats is Hamilton Hamler's Seven Powers. He's actually a neighbor of mine here in Los Altos. He
Yeah, and I
writes,
was just there's someone on this call who is in that community, and I was telling him over email yesterday that I reviewed the Hamilton's first draft of that manuscript to Seven Powers before
right.
it
Oh,
came out.
awesome!
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't know that.
profound. You're on the advisory board of his. Does he have a
Right.
fund now?
Yeah, I am on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. Which is like every time I go there, like my mind get expanded because they really distilled the concept of moats into a science, and their fund performance, what they kept like 30% over like 30 years or something like that is like a testament of their sort of thesis and work. And basically, there's really not a lot of moats you can have. And it takes a lot of work to understand sort of the moat you can have. So, they recently did some work on Netflix, which I thought was really fascinating. Um, and they were like, why did Netflix won over, the Disneys of the world? There's like during COVID, they all moved into their turf. Everyone said that Netflix is gonna die, and the stock went down, Disney stock went up, and there was like just everyone was negative on Netflix. They just like didn't see how they could survive like a behemoth like Disney kind of moving in with an existing catalog. Um, and sort of Hamilton's group, Strategy Capital, the way they thought about it is actually Netflix has economies of scale. And basically, the game of streaming is continuously creating fresh content. So having a backlog of content is actually not enough, and you need to be continuously creating this content, and this content takes billions of dollars. Um, and for you to, in order to make that investment, you need to have a base of millions of subscribers that could consume that content and justify that investment and get you to the next level of investment. So if you have a smaller base, maybe you make the first investment that is ROI negative, but you have to put up the next, whatever, $5 billion to create the next set of content, and you're just on this treadmill where you just run out of money and sort of energy, and you can't catch up because they kind of they have this well greased machine. And that's just to say, like, this stuff is like really hard to figure out. The question is like,
Well, I think, and so just to summarize, Amjad, I think your point here, which I agree with, is moats are rarer than people think. We
yes,
throw around the word in ways that have little resemblance to how Warren Buffett originally talked about it years ago and so forth. And many companies that assert that they have moats actually don't.
yeah.
So that's the base case. Okay, so then, so within the AI landscape today, uh, how do you think about it?
I just, maybe it's a cop out. I actually don't think anyone knows. So the reason a lot of app companies build models, part of it is the VC pressure. So venture capitalists will not be comfortable with a business that they feel is dependent on their underlying models for a few reasons. Some of it are rational. Um, One is that you're not in control of your margins. Like you're always at the kind of mercy of the models. You can't sort of optimize these things. Two, these models are moving into your turf, are moving into that. There's going to be this conflict of interest. And three, it's just like they need to justify the investment, like a big investment to their LPs, whatever. And it's like, oh, they have this IP, they have this moat, that is the underlying model. So, a lot of it is, I think it is like cargo culting. A lot of applications should not be building models, are building models because of perception.
Well,
Uh,
sorry, just to be clear, when you say a lot of AI application companies are building models, you don't mean they're not trying to create Anthropic from scratch, right? Or what do you mean when you say build their own models?
so just to give a few examples, like Vercel V0 came out with a model. Um, Windsurf came out with another model, and like none of those models are better than Claude at coding or agentic behavior. Like, what's the point? Like, you're either state of the art or not. If you're not state of the art, no one will use it. And so it is a cargo culting exercise.
Hmm.
You need to have a theory for how your thing is better, even if it is at like one vertical. So if you have data that's truly unique, and you can create a niche model. In fact, you probably shouldn't be pre-training. No startup, no application layer company should be pre-training. You should probably be fine-tuning all the like amazing open source models that are out there. If you have special reinforcement learning style data, I think there's a potential to create models that can spike or shine in a few areas. Your larger application will probably not entirely depend on this model, but there's like a feature or two that are very important, specific to your model, that it makes sense to kind of go and build that. Um, so
Yeah, and so that makes sense. And let's bring Yohei on stage because he and I were chatting about this the other day. And so welcome Yohei as we bring
just
you up.
just to like summarize, because I feel like I
Yeah.
a lot of ideas,
Well,
like just to tie around. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Tie a bow in it, but I want to continue it. I'm not done
Okay.
with it because I also want to see
All
you
right.
finish the
But
thought, Amjad.
hey, Ollie. Um, uh, I think as an investor, um, at the very early stages, I'm not thinking about moats at all. I'm just thinking about how dynamic the founders are, how technical, how hard charging. It's like the same thing. It's like a timeless thing. It's like kind of is the domain ripe for disruption? Are the incumbents in the domain slow moving and dinosaurs that can be disrupted? They're not going to be able to use AI effectively. All the stuff, and again, this is timeless, is what's important. I think
Yeah,
once,
and
yeah, go ahead.
or sorry, I think just picking up on that because actually that phrase "timeless" Amjad is precisely the phrase that Yohei and I were talking about the other day. And so curious, Yohei, for you to weigh in. I'll share one uh, sort of person who I think highly of, John Donahoe, who was just recently CEO of Nike, but when he was CEO of ServiceNow, we did a Village global event with him at ServiceNow HQ, and he talked about how, and John was formerly CEO of eBay and has been around the Valley a long time, and he talked about Silicon Valley is such an interesting place because on the one hand, there's all of this uh, cutting edge, new ideas, new thinking, new technologies. And yet the timeless principles of business remain, he said. And figuring out what are the timeless principles of investing, of company building, what have you, and then what actually is new that needs to be rethought, relearned, or emphasis shifted. That's a tricky balance to get right. And hey, you and I were chatting about when evaluating early stage founders building an AI, what do we look for? And you talked about, closeness to the customer and obsession with the customer, which
I
again,
agree
sounds
with
almost cliche.
yeah, I agree that I'm just like it's hard to have a moat because everything's so much easier to build. So like how like if you can get close to your customer, understand their problem deeply, learn to solve it. And I think we're still learning how to leverage AI and agents. So if you can stay on top of the best practices and figure out how to apply those to real problems, and I think you're in a good place. And you can figure out how to scale from there.
Yeah. And I guess, hey, just based on the discussion so far in the session, I'd love to get your perspective on shifting a little bit back to building applications and agents. We had a question from David Blake at Degreed about how to get, and for all of the non-engineers on this call and the engineers, like who want to lean into vibe coding, which I know is one of Amjad's favorite phrases. Um, what advice do you have for people who are building for the first time on Replit or other products to sort of get going firsthand using and building AI agents?
I've had a lot of people ask me this, and my suggestion to everyone is just start playing around, have fun with it. Think of something that interests you. Is there an API you want to try? Is there something personal that'd be fun? A lot of my projects are actually for my kids because it's really easy to do these little simple apps, and it's just a great place to start. And then as you get familiar with it, you can try to tackle more and more complicated things.
Got it. And so what are some examples? So Amjad mentioned you building Google Reader. And by the way, our little segment on Google Reader is generated. I've gotten multiple texts in real time here about the nostalgia people have over that. So who knew that it's, that emotional pressure point. So rebuilding Google Reader, but like, and Amjad too, feel free to weigh in, like inside the enterprise, say you're running an investment firm, an endowment, or a 50-person startup, like what are the kinds of things that a non-technical person can vibe code into existence?
Yeah, I actually have a great example. Everybody on our team now uses Replit Agent. I think every Monday I'd show up to our team meetings and say, "Look what I built this weekend." And eventually they were like, "Can I subscribe to Replit?" I was just, "Yes." Everybody on my team gets an agent, and one of my ops person who has no technical background, who was managing all of our data on Notion. When Replit came up with the Notion integration, I said, "There's a Notion integration. Why don't you try building an app on top of the data?" A week later, she showed me my executive dashboard that's built on top of our Notion data, and she did it with no technical background.
So you mean so created a dashboard, so they built a Replit agent to
Right.
crawl through all the
Yeah,
data that you had in Notion.
custom dashboard that pulls in all the data from different parts of our Notion, like into like all the stuff that I need to see in one place. Because she noticed that like our Notion's pretty well organized, but I struggle to like click through and find the stuff. So she just pulled all the stuff I want into a single page and built a Replit app. And so that was a really great internal tool, right? There's not much risk because I'm the only user. And it was like a great place to start, I think.
And what are you guys building, Amjad, inside Replit itself?
My favorite example, similar to Yohi's example, is uh, in HR, we needed a org charts, and a lot of the org charts, software in the market is too expensive and doesn't have the features that we want. We wanted something to like connect to like ADP and allows us to like sort of continuously pull from there, be able to like interactively look at the org chart, be able to like have versions so we can look at it over time. And our sort of HR, ops person decided to just like go build it. And she spent 3 days in Replit, never coded, built like an amazing org chart software that actually we can go out and sell. It's better than a lot of the SaaS software that charges you like $15,000-$20,000 a year for this kind of software. So there's a lot of different examples like that from our customers. Yesterday, I was just looking at, I called it an arbitrage opportunity. Someone, their company was quoted from like NetSuite $150,000 to build like a sort of a NetSuite extension of sorts. And he decided to go build it in Replit. It costed him $400, and he sold it to his employer for $32,000. And so maybe I'll link the tweet. And so this is like, there's like, 2 to 3 orders of magnitude savings that can come from using vibe coding in the enterprise.
Another tip I give people that I think is relevant to this point is that I think it's hard to replace a core product feature internal workflow with AI, especially if you're not familiar with it. So a great place to start with for work is start with things that you wish you had time for, but just don't, right? That kind of nice to have. That's a good place to start because it's low risk. You're not doing it anyways, right? It could be I want to track all the publications in all the publications in my industry, grab the writers' names, and then tag them by what they wrote about. Like that would be helpful for any company. You probably don't have time to do it, but that seems like a really great standalone tool that one might build. Right. So I often kind of ask that question, and it tends to trigger some ideas on where to start.
Got it. And what do either of you think about in terms of Max from Happyverse asks, what new capabilities do you expect to be unlocked by upcoming models, Sonnet 5, GPT-6, et cetera? Like, what is that? And also, Amjad, you've said separately that as founders, as builders, when we get too focused on the existing capabilities of the foundation models, we actually get trapped in a kind of a local maxima thinking. So just given how quickly the underlying capabilities are changing, whether it's founders who are building or lay people who are vibe coding, how do we think about the ground moving from under us, in the months ahead?
That's really tough question. Actually, an interesting anecdote here is, Cursor had like Cursor Composer, which is like a really, advanced code gen tool for its time, like in 2023, 2024. And then when agents came on the scene, starting with Replit and then others, they felt like their system was like old and they couldn't their users liked it. And so they had an innovator's dilemma where they don't want to miss the new thing. And so they started adding checkboxes. It's like, oh, checkbox, use agent. And so they went through a phase of kind of struggling to kind of like really go into the new thing. I think they figured it out now and they're at the forefront. But, you could see that being a lot bigger problem. Like if you have a big user base, a lot of enterprise customers, they don't want change. And so again, how do you deal with that? I think that's a timeless question of innovator's dilemma. And like the answer is, I think ultimately is really being bold and like be willing to, be willing to chew glass for a moment of time, see revenue go down, see customers leave in order to sprint towards the future.
I think one of the ways that I try to keep track of of how fast the underlying models move is to just use it all the time. And I feel like I have a pretty good sense of how far you can vibe code, right? I mean, baby AGI 2 years ago was vibe coded with ChatGPT, copy pasted. Probably my most complicated project I built again on Replit agent was VCpedia, which scrapes Twitter, grabs funding data. It's like a cheap, poor man's Crunchbase kind of, but it tracks funding data. That was probably one of the more complicated things I built with the Replit agent.
Sorry,
But
hey, just because we have so many investors in the call, describe again what you built. You built something that tracks funding
if you go to
announcements?
vcpedia.com, I have a
Okay.
couple of Twitter queries that run on a schedule. And then an LLM decides if there's funding data in that tweet. And then it extracts funding data from that tweet, converts it into tables of funding, startups, investors, and then enriches with Exa. And then I'm still working on the daily newsletter. So, I mean, it's again, like, is it better than Crunchbase? No. Did I build it over a weekend by myself? Yes.
Wow, fascinating. We'll put a link to that in the chat. Let's have Dennis come on stage from Eximal and ask your question. Dennis, welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Glad I fit the color scheme. Question for Amjad. I was wondering about how you build software at Replit. Do your agents build all the code from scratch, or can they use sort of pre-built components? And I'm asking that because when we build agents internally, it was a lot about how much we automate before we hand that over to the agent, such that they can handle the complexity.
Absolutely. Like I think perhaps paradoxically, you want as much determinism as possible.
Mm.
Like you want to leave as little freedom to the agent as possible. And the reason is because, these models are stochastic. And so like there's a lot of things in Replit agent that are deterministic. Like when we start the server, when we restart the server, when we install a package, when we show you when to deploy, when, all these things, the way we manage database, you want to restrict the points for which the agent is making a decision to the thing that you can't deterministically do. And this is where their power comes in. So absolutely, do as many things in classical programming before you plug in an agent.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. And Yohei, do you want to, should we screen share a little bit and get
you
into
wanna...
the Replit product?
I mean, I think the reason I think this is interesting is I've just done this with so many people where when people see me just start a project, the next time I see them, they've already started one. And it's really, I mean, I'm just seeing the screen so many times, but you go to Replit, you log in, and I think we had talked about an idea of using, looking at some stock. So I'm going to do the little cooking show trick, right? I want an industry sentiment tracker leveraging Y finance data across major industry where each line on the chart represents an industry, 5 to 10 tickers each, with the ability to manage the industries and tickers that go in each, with filters, etc., on the chart, designed elegantly and modern. So it's pretty straightforward. I specified that I wanted Y Finance because I know it's a free API. So, and I just type in start chat, and that's essentially how you do it. Now I'm going to do the cooking show trick, which is where I already have one that I started a little bit earlier. Now we're going to just pull that up because it's going to do 10, 15 minutes of work for me when we can't wait for that long. But this is the exact same prompt above. It worked for a while. And then I think it ran into a little error. So I said, I'm seeing an error fetching the data. It tried to use a different API, but I said, no, I want to use Y Finance. And then I said, how's the sentiment calculated? Data feels kind of flat. Those are the only things I typed in. And the result I got from this, is, where is it? There it is. Is this. So again, it was a single prompt.
Is that a public link that you can share?
I can deploy it and make it shareable. So again, if you want to actually share a product, but this is what I love about Replit is, if I press run, I can just test the app. But if I want to deploy it, I can say, I'll just do one machine sentiment, stock sentiment, .replit.app, and I'll click deploy. And then, in a minute, we can share the link and people can look at it. I mean, that's how easy it is to just like get something out there, right? And if you want a custom domain, you can go into the settings and add a custom domain and link it kind of like you would with WordPress essentially. And what you're seeing here is a handful of industries. I can go in here and see the different tickers that it's basing it on. I can add more industries. I can update the tickers, and it's giving me a daily sentiment analysis. I mean, so again, this was, idea you texted me about probably like 30 minutes before this call. And so, I mean, this is kind of the process, right? So if you have an idea, it's really as simple as just logging into Replit, typing in the question. And there are certain types of problems that I've seen people run into that do get a little bit tricky. And I think that's where some technical background helps on my end. But yeah.
That's great. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so we'll put the links. So thank you for sharing that. So for everyone on the call, if you haven't built something, get started today and let us know what you create. And I think that one click to deploy is pretty magical once you see it happen that way. I'm curious, Yohei and Amjad, when you thinking about as we get towards the end of our time together, thinking about the landscape of different agents and agent companies. Yohei, you mentioned that you're seeing a lot of founders build general autonomous agents, and there's not much differentiation among them. Unpack that a little bit, and where do you see people going wrong when they think about building or investing in agent companies?
I mean, it's hard to say because it's moving so fast. But 2 years ago when Baby AGI came out, everyone started building general agents on top. It was just way too early. We didn't have any of the tools, any of the know-hows. 2 years fast forward, I feel like we're seeing another resurgence of these general agents. But I still think there's just too many edge cases for them to be truly general, right? I think kind of an EA specialist agent is actually more of a specialist in my book because a general agent should really be able to do anything. So I think what we'll find, my guess is that some of today's stuff will kind of identify an ICP and try to make sure they can handle all the edge cases for that ICP, which eventually kind of turns them into specialized agents is kind of my gut feeling, although it's a weakly held conviction.
What's your sense, Amjad, in terms of general agents for specialists?
I think specialist is still the way to go. There's this interesting thing. It's like AGI is such a profound disruption that it's almost not useful to prepare for it. So you want to prepare for the world where we continue to have jobs and we continue to be useful as humans. And so, true general agents is AGI. And so my feeling is that narrow agents will continue to perform better.
So sorry, let's go slowly because these are some profound statements here. I want to make sure I understand it. True general agents is AGI.
Yep.
Okay, and so just unpack what that means.
So if you want an agent that can go into any domain and figure it out, so you can give it a novel task, like let's say you work in a sort of some kind of niche of a niche of a niche, you're like a sort of a nuclear engineer that works on a new material like salt or whatever to generate nuclear energy. And like models just don't have a lot of information about that. But but you wanted to actually go and research that and do something about that. Um, then you would need an AGI because it's going outside of the training data. So AGI, I think, is the most distilled way to kind of talk about an AGI is that it is generalizing outside of its training data. And we haven't seen evidence of that, of like agents going into a fundamentally new area and figuring it out without having pre-trained knowledge. Um, and once you have that, then like almost all jobs, especially jobs in front of the computer, will be gone in a matter of months or years. Um, and so that world is so disruptive. People call it the singularity. And by the way, by the time you have AGI, then the AGI companies will use the AGI to develop the next version of the AGI. So you're going to have this like
Right.
accelerating
Recursive, yep.
cycle. And so that world is so disruptive that I don't even try to like plan my business around it. It's like the moment of singularity. I plan my business around the trends that we're seeing with how AI is able to work longer, AI is able to use tools more effectively. AI has like more computer use capabilities. We're adding more training data on more domains. So today, the way automation will happen is that the big labs will like get a vertical domain and then get as much data on that domain and then train these models. By the way, the reason computer use doesn't work very well is because we don't have a lot of data. So they need to go to Scale AI and get that data. By the way, the thesis here is that Scale AI and companies like that will just get a lot more profitable because you need data for every domain if you don't have a sort of general agents. So for the foreseeable future, it's much better for sort of people to, for experts to imbue their domain expertise into a domain-specific agent. And that domain-specific agent will always perform better than a general agent up until the point that we get AGI.
Well, and I like Gurdain's comment here. Dr. Strangelove, or I guess he sent it just to host and panelists. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love AGI.
Yep.
That's a profound vision of the future. But I mean, I guess Amjad, just with respect to your comment about scale and needing data, like there's still a huge amount of data that exists only in the heads of humans that has not yet been ingested into the LLM. So there's still a long way to go, right? There's a lot of data that's not captured. I've heard someone was telling me this example of like a M&A transaction. I think it was Andrew Ng's example of like, think about how an M&A transaction happens. There's like 150 steps. And there are a small number of humans on planet Earth that understand each of those steps and understand the sequencing and how that all comes together. And none of that is codified in a way that can be adjusted by an LLM today. And there are like millions of those instances around how things get done in the real world that our models have not been trained on yet. So there's still quite some time, right, until all this.
Yeah, if you have an AGI, it'll figure it out. Obviously, it'll be super intelligence, and it doesn't even need to train on it. But Stan's AGI, it would need one of those labs would need to go instrument that and take that and buy it and put it into the training data, which they're increasingly doing. They're spending a lot of money on the compute, but they're spending equal amount of money going around and buying data.
Yeah. Hey, do you want to comment, and then we might bring someone in for a question?
Oh, the one thing that my mind kept going to was the Matrix helicopter scene. Like, if you had a general agent, it should be able to go look up like instructions on how to fly a plane, figure out how to control the fingers, maybe even build its own simulator, practice a little bit in the simulation, and then control a robot to fly a helicopter for you, right? I mean, hypothetically, that seems possible, but I feel like we're very far from that being reliable enough that I would jump on a helicopter with an AGI that just learned how to do it on its own. So I do feel like there's that my kind of sense of like how safe that feels is kind of the distance of that, how I measure.
And let's Brian Ramau just asked, which is a provocative question. This week, Dario from Anthropic predicted 10 to 20% unemployment rate in the next 1 to 5 years. Current unemployment is what, 3% in the US? Something like that. So even going to 8 or 9%, I think would be dramatic, let alone 20%. I mean, that's, I think, serious civil unrest. Amjad, what's your take on Dario's prediction?
It's like a point of contention, I guess. The employment rate is a lot more than 3% because of employment participation rate. Uh,
Fair.
so at any rate, I do think that a lot of routine jobs are, within the bullseye, within reach, like within months of reach, especially when we talked about computer use, quality assurance, data entry, any sort of routine in front of the computer thing is going to get automated. And then you go into some of the things that require a little more creativity and but agents are able to do, such as like, I don't know, SDR and entry level jobs. And so I think in the next 1 to 5 years, 10 to 20% just feels like a lot. Even doubling, even going from 3 to 6, yeah, to 9%.
Well, yeah, the problem with the unemployment prediction stuff is there's multiple variables. One is like, what's the progress of AI? The other is what new things can humans invent to do for themselves? Like the canonical example is massage therapy, which did not exist as a profession, 40 years ago, whenever it was. And then out of nowhere, with all this abundant leisure time, like an entire industry was created, and now millions of people do that work, and billions of dollars are spent every year. So you can imagine several new fields like massage therapy being created that will then employ people. And so you're this kind of the simultaneous analysis of the progress of AI and of the path to AGI, along with like the frontiers of human creativity and how we want to spend leisure time.
Yeah, and there's other, so-called limiting factors. We compute might be a limiting factor, energy might be a limiting factor, the willingness of enterprise to adopt this technology is a limiting factor. Government might step in and sort of regulate the rollout of these automations. So it's not entirely clear to me that it's going to be as smooth as what Dario said.
Yeah. This in our closing minutes, what are some hot takes on companies, founders, technologies that you're really excited about that you're paying attention to? Could be startups and formation stage stuff, could be at scale, that you're really either bullish on or perhaps that you think are threatened or overrated.
That's a fun question. Wait, just to quickly touch on the last point, though, I do feel like historically, every time there's a new big technology that replaces jobs, everyone's always afraid of it replacing jobs. It ultimately always creates more jobs. And like I see all the arguments for why AGI wouldn't be the case. Again, not AGI, but 5 to 10 years, I think we'll still have more jobs. Like I don't know any robot mechanics, but I'm assuming there'll be plenty of those, probably more than car mechanics, right? 5 to 10 years from now. So on the company side, man, there's so many exciting, fun companies.
Yeah, so tick off for both of you, tick off a few that you're excited about or are tracking or invested in, and we'll put the links in the chat so people can check them out.
I'll drop to Neo is a company that built a fully autonomous ML engineering team. They benchmarked it against 50 Kaggle competitions. I think it scored a medal on 26% of them. So it's essentially a Kaggle grandmaster, right? Autonomous agent. So I think there's a lot of things it can do for helping, for example, companies that want to fine tune their own models. Maybe they don't need to. Maybe they can just use an autonomous agent to do that. A recent one called Layers is a fully autonomous marketing ad agent that's baked into the IDE. So you can just download it and run it from your IDE, and it'll understand your code and product and just start marketing it for you. I love that idea of like doing everything from your IDE. I can imagine a future where you can, register your company from your IDE and just like hire people from your IDE, and a developer can just sit in their IDE and just like run the whole business.
Very cool. Amjad, what about you?
I think vertical agents, it's still tough, but I think they'll start to work. Obviously, some companies had recent troubles like 11x. I still think it's a good idea to for a company to say, okay, we're just gonna focus on one role and go and try to automate it. A company I invested in recently is Basis. It's like the accounting agent. I think the URL is offbasis.com. So it is like, okay, we have domain expertise and we're just gonna we're just gonna go and like put that into the agent. But also there's like a white glove service aspect of it. It was like, we're gonna go into these accounting firms and teach them about it because they're gonna have, again, they're just not gonna, it's gonna be hard for them to adopt this technology. So vertical agents is very interesting. Sort of, I've always been skeptical of investing in labs, but I did invest in one lab, which is Francois Choulet and Mike Knoop's lab. So Mike is the founder of Zapier. Francois started Keras, the ML framework, worked at Google. They started this company called India, NDEA. And it is they're the founders of ArcAGI. So ArcAGI is this benchmark that everyone's competing on. It's like it's widely known that it's the best sort of AGI benchmark. Their approach is to use program synthesis as the basics of how the models work. So program synthesis is like how you generate code, but it has like a more discrete way of generating. It's like more correct way of generating code. As we talked about earlier, in my opinion, software agents are core component of what you might call AGI or general agents in the future. So it's one of those bets. It's my first bet that I'm making on like a sort of AGI company.
Yeah.
I think it has a very interesting approach.
So we'll bring Jack on stage real quick for our last question about how to integrate sort of vibe coding and Replit into a software engineering existing code base. Jack, go for it.
Hey, thanks, guys. I have a super practical question, which is just, it's clear that if you're just trying to create something from scratch, it's just incredible what you can do super quickly. But what if you want to take an existing tool that's part of a large code base and you want to improve it, or you want to add in a new tool in an existing code base that you don't have right now? And that's what we're trying to do, and we're finding it more challenging to make that happen in a seamless way. Just curious if you have any best practices on that.
With Replit, we're focused on greenfield applications that are built on Replit. Over time, those get more complex, and you can continue working on them, and we're just continuously making the system better. But we want to control the initial condition of the app such that the agent is going to do its best job. And as you've seen in like things like Yohi has built like VCpedia and things like that, you can go pretty far. The way people are integrating Replit into their product development process is like as a prototyping tool. And it goes way beyond the Figma prototypes, whatever, because what we're seeing is product managers and designers are actually taking it to users and testing it in front of users, and maybe going through like a beta program with users to kind of learn a lot more. And we're hearing from customers that it's like, cutting 20-30% of the product development lifecycle time. We want to get to a point where you can like import a GitHub repo and like run Replit agent on it. But I think that agents are not very good at it right now. I'm sure you're trying Devin and Codex and things like that. It's still not there. With Replit, we're always trying to be at the edge of what's possible, but we don't want to overshoot. So
it sounds like prototyping for now, maybe full integration later.
I would try Codex and Devin and these things.
Thank you, Jack. Amjad, Yohei, thanks so much for the insights. Villagers around the world, thank you for joining us. We'll keep the conversation going. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
This was fun.
Thank you.